Welcome into Bet On It, week 3 of the college football season. I'm Raineri alongside Marco D'Angelo, and we've got the usual show for you coming up here. We'll have a little TNA with Ralph Michaels. We'll have some gold with VR, and of course, we'll run through our best bets and our barking dogs. But we do, of course, want to let you know, yes, we are missing one of the family here in Kelly in Vegas. And if you guys are like most of us here at Wager Talk, you are probably animal lovers or dog lovers. I know certainly I am, and they become part of the family. And when it's time to say goodbye, it's never an easy situation. So our hearts ache here for Kelly, but she will be back, and she made it very clear she'll have her best bets we're going to give out here, and she will be back here in a couple of days. But our thoughts are with her. And having said that, there is some football happening that we've got to go on. And Marco, we're going to start with a game that is, shall we say, going to be the topic of conversation, I feel like, in just about every week when it comes to Deion and Colorado. So Colorado State taking on Colorado here. These numbers keep creeping up. What are you thinking about this matchup?
Well, Joe, you know what? When you're dealing with social media, it's all about clickbait. And we were between two things. Either I was going to do the show in a Speedo this week, or we were going to break this game down. Which would have got more clicks? We decided the Colorado game would get more clicks. So here we are. We're going to break down Coach Prime. And you know what? I'm going to get a lot of hate, as I did again last week. I am not jumping in front of Colorado because I don't like Colorado. I'm jumping in front of Colorado because the line's inflated and they've got a big, big game next week. And they're coming off a very satisfying win last week, the first home game for Colorado with Deion Sanders as head coach. Granted, this is an in-state rivalry. I get that. But which do you think had a little more, meaning as far as rivalry goes? This goes back to the old days of the Big 12, Colorado and Nebraska. We always looked forward to that matchup. So that was a very satisfying win last week for Colorado. I see them winning this game, but they can't help but think about what's on deck. And that's next week with Oregon. I'm going to go ahead and take Colorado State plus the points here. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. We saw that Nebraska, if they didn't shoot themselves in the foot, were hanging in that game. 4 turnovers did them in. And you can say it's the Colorado defense that produced those, or you can just say it's a shitty Nebraska offense that already has 8 turnovers on the year. I'm going to take Colorado State plus the points. I've got it Colorado 41-23. They get the win, and then we'll look forward to more hype next week when they face Oregon.
Mark, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the hype train is real. I mean, at this particular point, we cashed last week on the show by fading the total against Nebraska here. Now, I will say Colorado State having a week off, an extra week. Quite honestly, I'm not sure that it's going to matter one way or the other. But if I was going to jump into this game, and maybe a little bit of a look-ahead spot, like you said, with Oregon being that first big matchup coming up next week for Colorado. This game in Denver also, I believe, at what was Mile High. I don't know what the hell they call it anymore now. But I don't see any reason to try to dive in, laying 3 touchdowns or taking 3 touchdowns. I would just stick with the total and say, listen, the one thing we know for sure is that the public is going to be all over Colorado scoring a ton of points. They're going to think this thing is flying high here. 61 now is what I'm seeing in the marketplace. So if I was going to jump into this game, Marco, I absolutely see no reason to move away from the total like we did last year. I would go contrarian, and I would say you're going to need an awful lot of points from Colorado State to hit the over on this one. I don't think we get there. So I'm absolutely leaning to the under in this matchup. But that's not the only prime time game or big game that we're going to be talking about here, because there's another one in the swamp, Marco, down in my neck of the woods here in Florida. And They are home here, Florida. They are getting 6.5 now. We've seen this come down a little bit from 7s, and Florida getting a little bit of love. Total of 59 here. So where are you going with the Tennessee Vols taking on the Florida Gators?
Well, Joe, you look at this one, and history says you're supposed to take Florida. Why? Well, they've won 16 out of the last 18 matchups straight up in this series. You look at Tennessee, they're 2-0 on the season. They've won by a combined score of 79-26. But let's pump the brakes. I got to admit, that was against a Virginia team that's not very good this year. And then Austin Peay. I mean, come on. They were so outmanned in that one. But I look at a Florida team, and before everybody gets all excited about taking them as the dog here, my concern is we saw them in week 1 go on the road to Utah. Now, granted, not an easy place to play Utah, and Utah does have a good defense, one of the few teams in the Pac-12 that can play defense, but they didn't have their top quarterback. Cam Rising was not in the game. They went with the backup quarterback, and Florida, couldn't get anything going offensively. Utah scored enough points to win that game. I'm concerned how good the Florida team is. I think the Tennessee team, obviously, they're not as good as their scores of the first 2 games, but I still think there's talent there. I think they've kept the offensive playbook pretty vanilla through those first 2 games, saving it for this one. You'll see them empty the cupboard in this game. There won't be anything left in the playbook when they face Florida on Saturday. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take Tennessee. I'm going to lay the points. And here's a little stat for you. Florida, the last 3 seasons, when they're coming off a home win in their previous game, they're just 1-9 against the spread in their next game. Go ahead and give me Tennessee. I'm calling it 34-23 Tennessee.
All right, 34-23. Well, Marco, by my estimation, that's an under, which is exactly where I am going in this game, mostly because I think the defenses are maybe some of the better units going to be on the field. I don't trust Grammer. I didn't trust him at Wisconsin. I don't trust him now. While they beat up on a Sisters of the Poor team last week, I'm still not impressed. I don't think he is somebody, much like we saw last year, right, with Richardson there. He was capable of exploding, and they were capable of getting 30 points or more a game. I don't see that happening here. I see Tennessee's defense being able to limit what they can do. I think the best chance for Florida in this game is to be able to run the football, which they didn't do all that well there against Utah, which is ultimately, I think, what cost them that game. You're not going to win a game by dropping him back 40 times and expecting him to throw over 350 yards. Not going to happen against this defense, and vice versa. I have not been overly impressed with Joe Milton and that offense just yet. I think they're still adjusting in many aspects. I think 59, way too many points here, Marco. So I am looking at the under in that big game coming up in the Swamp with Tennessee taking on the Gators. But we got a lot more to get to here on Bet On It. We're going to shift gears and we're going to send it to our good friend, the Pen, Mr. Ralph Michaels, with a little college football TNA.
Welcome, guys. College football TNA, an exciting weekend of college football coming up. And I'll tell you what, I want you on board with my package this weekend. Last weekend, Saturday, college football, a 6-1 day. Sunday in the NFL, a 2-1 day. At 8-2 weekend, I'm going to have a 5% play on Saturday, a 5% play on Sunday. It's only the 3rd time in 6 years at Wager Talk I've had 2 5% plays the same weekend. And you could save 50% off my monthly package. Use the code RALPH50, RALPH50, 50% off a 30-day or 50% off a 12-month all access, your choice. Let's get right to it. We're going to start with a nerd chart, guys. College football, every game you've turned on, you've heard about announcers talking about the clock does not stop on first downs with the exception of the first 2 minutes. So let's break down the scoring for the last 5 years. You'll see this is for the first 2 weeks of the season only, each of the last 5 years. We've averaged 54.5 points per game this year. Guess what? Last year, 56.1. 2 years ago, 54.5. So scoring down only 1.6 points per game. Average total has actually gone down by 2.2 points per game. So you've actually had value to the overs. Plays per game, 66.2 this year, 67.8. So a lot of people were guessing 2 to 3 series less per game, has come nowhere near that. And take a look, the over-unders, the first 2 weeks of the season in college, actually 50.6% of the games have gone over. So what does it tell us? It tells us that there was a lot of overreaction on how many plays would be missing from a college football game. Take note, and we'll update this chart in a few weeks to see how those numbers have changed. Well, I've got 4 systems for you here. And remember, we started last week. If you go to my homepage at Wager Talk, I will have a PDF with all of these situations and the teams it applies to, wt.buzz/RM. System number 1 in college football. Early in the season, games 1 through 4. If you are off a home loss by 1, 2, or 3 points since 2013, you have covered 67.4% of the time. So what 3 teams last week were off a home loss of 3 points or less? That would be Virginia, Buffalo, and Northern Illinois, all fall into the 67.4% category. System number 2, you have at least 2 wins, you have 0 losses, your opponent is exactly 500 straight up, so 1-1, 2-2, 3-3. You're an away favorite, and last game your opponent was an away dog. So this could be a 2-0 team, a 3-0 team, a 4-0 team. This system you can use throughout the year. So what teams have at least 2 wins and no losses? They're an away favorite. Their opponent is 500, and their opponent was an away dog last year. These teams have gone 67.4%. That's the exact same percentage as the first system. It is not a mistake. Different numbers, but 67.4% for Penn State, Oklahoma, and Georgia State all fit into that system. System number 3, since 2019, if you are a dog of up to 17 points, and you're off a loss as a double-digit favorite. So you're off an embarrassing loss. You were a double-digit favorite last week. Now you're an underdog. Every line up to plus 17. Those teams have only gone 29-43 against the spread. That is 40.3%. That says to fade Buffalo and fade North Texas. And the final one, if you are off a loss to an FCS foe, that's about as embarrassing as you can get. And folks, I remember in the 90s when the FBS and FCS had a bigger disparity between the talent level. If you lost to an FCS team, you usually bounce back strong. But listen to this number. Since 2017, if you lost to an FCS foe in your last game, you have only gone 14-23, 38%. Not a big sample size, but the teams that lost to an FCS team, Buffalo, Northern Illinois, and Nevada. So the funny thing is, Northern Illinois and Buffalo were mentioned in a couple of situations today, some positives, some negatives, so you would obviously cross those out. But remember, guys, all of these trends and angles with the ATS records and with the teams it applies to will be in a combined NFL and college football PDF by Wednesday evening, wt.buzz/RM.
All right, gotta love a little TNA there with Mr. Ralph Michaels. If you haven't had a chance, make sure you check out what he's got to say on this week's NFL edition of Bet On It. Some great TNA coming your way. And speaking of great information, knowledge is power. We always say it here at wagertalk.com, which is why all of us utilize our friends at the Gold Sheet, and there's no reason for you not to be utilizing them as well. And right now, you are invited to check out their NFL Week 2 as well as the NCAA Week 3 edition for free. That's right, for free. All you have to do is go to wt.buzz/GS and use those credentials on the screen. Username, WT free, and get this password, WT free. You'll see exactly what all of us get to see on a weekly basis. We're talking about analysis on every NFL and NCAA football game. You are going to have their power rankings, box scores, everything you need to know to make smart investing decisions in the NCAA college football season. Go try it for free right now. Use those passwords, WT free, both for the username and password at our friends at thegoldsheet.com. All right, Marco, the dogs are barking this week in week 3 of the college football season, so I'm not going to hold it against you. Been a rough week here, so I will let this one slide, but tell me, what dog is barking in your neck of the woods here?
Well, the dog that's barking in my neck of the woods, I tried earlier this season, and I ended up with a bad case of rabies whenever I took them. But I'm going to give them another shot, and that is South Alabama. As I said, week 1, very similar spot. They were on the road catching 6 at Tulane. They lost the game by 20 points, but that's what happens when you beat yourself and turn the football over 5 times, is what they did in that particular game. They bounced back last week, a game that they were supposed to win. They played Southeast Louisiana, 35-17 final. You know, a win's a win. You know, I talk about it in horse racing. Whenever you drop a horse in class and he wins, he doesn't know who he beat. We don't tell him. And they had 248 yards on the ground, 261 through the air. So that, to me, gives them the boost of confidence and hold on to the football. I think they can move the football this week against Oklahoma State. And looking at Oklahoma State, do I really want to lay points with Oklahoma State? This is a team that in their 2 games haven't managed a lot of offense. They scored 27 points in both games, and that was against Central Arkansas and Arizona State. Not exactly defensive juggernauts. I'm going to look for them, who happen to be in a bad spot. They played last week here in the desert out in Arizona, taking on Arizona State. And next week, they open up conference play against Iowa State. How excited are they going to be to play South Alabama? I'm going to call for the upset. We're going to take the 7.5, but I've got South Alabama 24-23. Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, that's great. And is it bad that I was looking for every way not to play Oklahoma State? And I think you just gave it to me, Marcus. So I might be losing a few of my alumni friends from there. But I've got a game too, Marco. It's a little bit bigger number here, and we just checked it. It's still hovering at 10, and that's going to be Indiana getting those 10 points, getting ready to take on Louisville. This is going to be at Lucas Oil Stadium here, so it's going to be a bit of a neutral site, but not really. They got a big feeling here. A lot of IU fans are going to be showing up here. And listen, this is an eyeball test to me. I watched Indiana take on Ohio State, who everyone had as a top 5 team in this country. I thought Indiana hung in well with them. I could not have been more impressed with their defense. I wasn't crazy about the bouncing back and forth between quarterbacks, but it looks like they have settled in on their QB for the year, and the kid gives you certainly enough opportunity, not just throwing the ball, but being able to run the ball. And in the meantime, I'm sorry, I think Louisville still has a lot of issues on defense. I don't think they should be a 10-point favorite over this Indiana squad. Now, granted, they got a few more guys back than Indiana does as far as experience goes, but from what I've seen thus far between these two teams, there is absolutely no reason to think that Indiana cannot keep this thing close late in this game with a possible chance of pulling out the upset. So I will take the 10. I will also sprinkle a little bit here on the money line coming up this weekend, week 3 here in college football. All right, it's been a while here, Marco, but I understand the deli is finally back open here, if I'm not mistaken. Heard you got a little bit of a sandwich you want to share with us here.
Yeah, Joe, we waited a couple of weeks to get the deli open, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you like a little semi-bonus. It's just also eligible because I came very close. I was between two of them, and you know what? Full disclosure, last week's college football show, yours truly, I sucked. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But as bad as I was on the Saturday show, we were that good and some better on the NFL show as we swept the board. So let's get things rolling in college this week. The also eligible, just didn't quite get in there, was Wyoming over Texas. Why? Well, that's a sandwich galore. Obviously, you had Texas winning last week over Alabama, big upset, and they play their conference opener next week against Baylor. So talking about a little sandwich spot there with Wyoming. But the one that made the card is Ohio U. Now, I know that might not sound like a tasty sandwich, and sometimes, you know, you got to eat a healthy sandwich, not, you know, juicy, big fat burger or whatever. Ohio U, they're in a spot when you look at this one, the knee-jerk reaction is you've got a Big 12 school playing a MAC school, and the line's less than a field goal. Basically pick the winner. You know which way most people are going to gravitate with that question thrown in front of them. Yeah, they're going to run and grab Iowa State, and why wouldn't you? You also look at the fact that you're going to say, well, Iowa State's looking to bounce back, coming off a loss. They're going to be in a bad mood. Yeah, they probably are in a bad mood that they lost, but you know what? They lost because their offense sucks. That's why. They scored 13 points in a rivalry game against Iowa. Granted, that series has a tendency to play to very low-scoring games, but still, I didn't see anything from that offense that strikes fear in my eyes. We've got Ohio U at home. The sandwich situation, well, you got Iowa State coming off of Iowa, their in-state rival, and what do they got next week back at home? Yeah, conference opener against Joe's Oklahoma State Cowboys. I'm not doing it. I'm going to go ahead and take Ohio U. As ugly as it is, I'll hold my nose if I have to getting to the window, but I'm going to call for the outright upset with them. 24-20. Ohio U had 4 turnovers in last year's meeting when they got beat by Oklahoma State. Iowa State. They get their revenge today. Take Ohio U.
Ooh, Ohio U. Love that there, Marco, as a opportunity to jump in. And of course, VR is going to come up here in just a minute. We're going to talk a little bit about his college football gold this week, but I do have an interesting play here when it comes to fading the public here. And Joe Public is no doubt all over that wonderful team. Oh, Washington is just tremendous. Michael Penix Jr., oh my God, Michigan State is an absolute hot mess. Mel Tucker is suspended. He's going to be, I got all of that. But I'm telling you right now, Washington has blown out the first 2 teams that they have faced at home. Now, this is their first real road game heading into a hostile environment, and I love what Michigan State did. First of all, they have a longtime assistant there in the DC who's going to be the interim coach, but they also brought in a guy that knows a little something about actually winning games at Michigan State, and that's Mike D'Antoni. So he is going to be there with an opportunity here to rally the troops. Now, I am not naive enough here to say, hey, they are going to upend Washington. I don't think they're going to upend them, but I do think this line has gotten a little bit out of control, and the public has kind of gone instant fade because of the Mel Tucker news and because of the dysfunction that is happening there. But we also saw this happen to Washington last year when they fired Herm Edwards at Arizona State. There was dysfunction, and what happened in that game? Arizona State ended up winning it 45-38. So I do think it is a bit of an overreaction here, looking to fade automatically Michigan State at home. With everything going around, I think they do rally. I don't know that they win, but I certainly think they're going to be able to keep it close enough. So I will take what is now, I believe, up to 17 points here in this matchup coming up this weekend. All right, we have got some gold for you. And, of course, nobody better to deliver the gold here this week in college football than our good friend VR, Gianni the Greek. What do you got for us here in week 3 of the college football season?
All right, we are ready to go, and I have a lot of gold to share, so I don't want to waste your time. Here's the bottom line. We are not going to spend hours analyzing each and every one of those plays. In fact, we do that in the steam room on Sundays, 2 hours leading into kickoff. Everyone's invited. Moving forward, I want to do it on Saturdays as well, because there is just so much, not just information I want to share, but also some knowledge and experiences to help you become better sports bettors. With all that said, there's 5 factors that I look for, and that's what I trade. It's my network, which is hard to accumulate. I've been doing this for almost 3 decades now, working with a lot of sharp bettors, and that network is one of the sources of information I rely on. Next is price action. Anyone could learn that. You follow line moves. You find the openers, you track during the week, and you check the closers. And you focus mostly on the limits. What are the movements based on the limits of the sports books? You'll start to understand which are being set up, which are legit. And finally, mean reversion. No one's ever as good or as bad as they look in any one week. Like Marco has said to us over and over again, analytics, I've said analytics, stat, and data, try to look for the advanced stuff, not the readily available stuff. And finally, momentum. We all know that. You don't get in front of it. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Those are the 5 factors that help me find some winners. Here's the steam that I moved for these groups in college football. And when it comes to totals, here's what you need to focus on. Follow on Saturday if there's any buybacks. When the limits get bumped up, you'll be able to figure out which of these were setups. If you don't see any resistance, then you know that it's the right move. So here's a little indicator on how you can tell whether this was being set up or whether it's legit. So let's do the totals real quickly. Start off on Friday night. Utah State Air Force. We're going over. The over got steamed down. That was the dummy move. Got it down to about that 45 range. Then the steam came over 45, 45 and a half, 46, 46 and a half. That's why it got to as high as 47. Still like the over there. Then on Saturday, Bowling Green, Michigan. We're going to go over 51. Flip it. Game 179, North Texas La Tech. Over 64 and a half. Game 183-84, Northern Illinois, Nebraska. Over 45 and a half. Over 46. And finally, BYU, Arkansas, game 195-196, under 51. Now I have some sides for you, and these I really love. We got some gold this week. Start off with Navy on Thursday night, but only first quarter, plus 4.5 points in the first quarter on Navy. Then we move into Friday, primetime, Army, UTSA. We're on Army plus 10. Army plus 10. Finally, let's move on to Saturday. Game 120, Old Dominion, plus 2 touchdowns. 121, Liberty, minus 3. 132, Mississippi State, plus 9.5. Mississippi State, plus 9. Game 142, Rutgers, minus 5. Move down to game 166, Texas A&M. Texas A&M minus 34.5. Texas A&M minus 35. Game 176, Florida. This was Florida at 7. Florida at 7 minus 115. Florida at 7 minus 120. So they laid a little juice to get that key number of 7. Then game 184, Nebraska. Nebraska minus 11. 188, UAB minus 2. Drop down to Houston. Game 207, Houston plus 7.5. Now you have a handful of sides, a handful of totals to work with. Dig into those. Know that when we place these, they were plus EV. Some of the value has been extracted. It doesn't mean all the value has been extracted. Remember, the cigarette butts, the cigar butts that Warren Buffett always talked about. You can still get a drag out of it. You want to trade it, and you'll find some value in plenty of these. Whether you follow, fade, or ignore, I just hope you make some money on Saturday in college football. Next, we're moving to NFL.
Outstanding VR as usual. Thank you very much. And you're not going to want to miss the gold that he will be dishing out on this week's NFL version of Bet On It. So a lot of great stuff still to come, including a couple of best bets that we're going to give you here. And we do want to remind you, if you're new to Bet On It and to Wager Talk, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Nobody, and I mean nobody, has better college football content on a daily basis like Wager Talk. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button and join the family here at Wager Talk TV. Knowledge is absolutely power. And Marco, when it comes to having a little bit of juice and a little bit of power, it is best bet time here on this edition of Bet On It. So tell us, which one of these games did you circle are you looking at for a best bet?
Well, Joe, before we get to that best bet, got a little offer for viewers. You want to get on board all plays this week for me, 7 days. That's all sports, football, basketball, baseball. You get it all. In basketball, you're saying, wow, might have some WNBA action there. You never know. But definitely baseball and football, college and pro. $99 normally for 7 days of service. A 3-day package is $69. I'm going to give you 7 days for the price of 3. Just use coupon code MD69. That's MD69. Use that at checkout when you purchase a 7-day all-access package. It'll deduct $30 and get you 7 days for the price of 3. Now, on to this week's best bet. And we are going to take a look at a team that I didn't think I would say in the favorite role, but that is North Carolina. They're a team that we know about their defense. We know it leaves a lot to be desired, but I like this matchup. And everybody's going to be quick to want to grab Minnesota plus the points. They're going to just look to last week's game and see once again North Carolina, struggled with a big dog. But you know what? That dog, Appalachian State, is a scrappy dog. They give everybody trouble. I am looking at this one as much as I am going with North Carolina as I am going against Minnesota. Minnesota hasn't shown me anything in 2 games that makes me excited. Yeah, they're 2-0. They played Nebraska. They should have lost the Nebraska game. We saw that game on Thursday night. That was opening week. The only reason they won that game was Nebraska couldn't help keep shooting themselves in the foot. 4 turnovers in that game. Minnesota finished +3 in the turnover margin. When you're +3 in a football game, you are supposed to win, not by 13-10. You're supposed to have some separation, and you're supposed to score some points. That was a hideous game for Minnesota. Then last week they played Eastern Michigan. They won 25-6. Their offense only had 117 yards passing. That's where the problem's going to come in. They can run the football. I get that. And if you run the football well, you can keep the football away from North Carolina. Here's the problem. That North Carolina offense with Drake May, that offense can move the football. And once you get a couple score separation in this game, you know what Minnesota can do with that running game? Yeah, you know what. It'll become useless when they have to go to try to play catch up and throw the football. I think North Carolina wins this one. I think they pull away in the second half. I've got North Carolina winning 35-20. I'll go ahead and lay the 7.5. And for everybody that wants to say how Minnesota looks like a live dog, this game is at the 7. They could have moved 6.5. You could have moved to 7.5. Which way did it go? Yeah, it's on the other side of the touchdown. That tells me which is the right side here in this one. Minnesota's going to have a long day chasing those North Carolina receivers down the sideline. Take North Carolina. Best bet for college football.
All right, like that, Marco, and make sure you guys visit him at wagertalk.com. Take advantage of that great deal that he has because, well, I chose what I feel is going to be one of the bigger blowouts of the weekend here, Marco, and I think it is about that time that the Wisconsin Badgers impose their will on a team, and that team is going to have to be Georgia Southern, unfortunately for them this weekend. Now, This was 17 and a half earlier this week. It's obviously going in Wisconsin's favor now as we're sitting at 19, but I don't care. My numbers have this as more than a 3-touchdown win for Wisconsin anyway. I mean, listen, they should have won that game on the road against Washington State last week if it wasn't for the 3 turnovers that they gave, including one which was, taken back for a touchdown. They shot themselves in the foot, but they outgained a pretty darn good Washington State team here, and they did a pretty good job defensively limiting what was going on offensively with Ward and company there at Washington State. So now welcome in a Georgia Southern team who is without a doubt terrible on defense. They're only returning 4 starters here. They've played the Citadel. They've played absolutely nobody here. And while they have won it and looked pretty impressive offensively, I will repeat, they've played nobody here. And now they got to go on the road and take on a pissed-off Wisconsin team who is not going to be in the mood at home to deal with any sort of letdowns as they're getting ready for Big Ten action beginning next week. So I fully anticipate there will be with Luke Fickell taking the foot off the gas. There won't be any holding back. They will run. They will throw. The defense will shut them down. And when it's all said and done, Wisconsin is going to be a big winner this Saturday in college football. And there you have it. This edition of Bet On It College Football Style to recap exactly what's going on here. If you're just joining us, we'll go ahead. Here it is on the screen for you as you can check out all the games that we broke down. We do also want to remind you that Bet On It, the NFL edition, is coming your way. And the best way to always never miss one of these episodes is by going ahead, hitting the like button, hit the subscribe button, become part of the family here at Wager Talk TV. On behalf of Marco, VR, Ralph Michaels, Kelly Stewart, Marco D'Angelo, we appreciate the time. And hey, if it's more football knowledge and previews you want, well, you've got one right on the screen right now. Go ahead and click that video and you'll get all of the game previews we have coming up for this week in week 3 of the college football schedule. Best of luck.